Hey, deadly listeners, welcome to the Indigipreneur Podcast, a show that helps you gain a better understanding of Indigenous entrepreneurship and answer all your related questions. I'm your host, Dean Foley, an Indigenous entrepreneur with over 5 years' experience in the field, in the trenches. And in today's episode, we'll hear from Jessie about First Nations international engagement, a pathway to self-determination, which she spoke about at the First Nations Economic Forum. Good to go.
All good, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Martin. Anyway, I'm a Wagadagam and Yuin man. I'm the CEO of ATSIIEO, so we're the Aboriginal and Torres International Engagement Organisation. So, hence the acronym. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know. But what I'm here today to just to basically have a bit of a conversation around is the idea around First Nations international engagement and how we can utilise that as a path to self-determination and some sort of autonomy, basically, for our communities and for our people across the country. So just here, a bit of a historical perspective on First Nations international engagement. Anyways, I mean, we are the oldest diplomats, within not only within our region, but within worldwide. I mean, we're the most ancient culture on the planet. I mean, we've been doing this sort of stuff for a very, very long time, and not only with with surrounding tribal nations, not only with different clan groups, like across the country and these sort of things now, but even over the seas and to our north and to our east as well. So, Torres Strait engagement, obviously through through Papua New Guinea, place like Papua New Guinea to Fiji. We've got a long history of this, these sort of connections there as well. I mean, we just look at in the north of the country with mob, up in WA, MT across far north Queensland there, and their connection, their engagement with the Macassans as well, over the centuries, and as well as that, I mean, even having a connection so far as as being as what we say as the extension of the Silk Road, so to speak, into the Pacific. But even having connections with with China as well on that sort of stuff. And I mean, if we're talking to some of these different tribal groups up in the north, they'll say, look, we've had this, had these arrangements in place for over 1,000 years. I mean, our archaeological evidence, we're finding porcelain, pottery, and and the likes of which is centuries old. But the fact that we've got we're for centuries being able to have our own engagement, have our own trade, have our own, and make sure that, the voices that were coming from our communities were from our communities. I mean, after 1897, with the restriction of sale of opium Act, the protection of, and I say that, protection of Aborigines Act, when that was brought in, it was, again, designed to, control the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and it was designed to stop Asian influence, as they see it at the time for white Australia from coming into the country. So 1901 to 1905, our trade effectively was completely cut off. We had a situation where we've got in the north, again, in the north of the country, where we still have those strong ties, we still have those strong trade links with the Macassans, and those trade links into China. And once that was all, once the government of the day anyway came down very, very heavy-handed on these sort of things now, and put a stop to those things. But again, our history, if you're going up there, you've got rock art sites with paintings of the ships coming into shorter trade. We don't just have those oral stories and that oral tradition within our communities either around that sort of engagement. But even language has been influenced by our connections overseas as well in that part of the world. As well as there's our flora and fauna. Look at tamarind trees, for example. Tamarind trees dot the entire north of the coast, from WA all the way over to North Queensland, and they become a bit of a staple, a bit of part of the diet, but part of our way of being up there these days, with the tamarind trees now, and picking the fruit off there. But these things now, they never came from here originally. They came from over there. They were brought in as part of that trade now. But again, that's testament to the legacy that that our ancestors and our brothers and sisters from, ancestors from across the sea, that they planted together. And I mean, and I think, particularly in 2022 now, I think it's a great time to be having this conversation about, well, what does First Nations diplomacy and First Nations trade and First Nations international aspirations look like? Because again, historically, we've been very, very strong and very, very active within this space. But again, due to, government, segregation, due to government management, due to, impacts of colonization and basically the laws that we've come up under this state, all of this was robbed from us, so for us to be, basically take our future back in our hands and start sending these delegations out from our communities in our own way, in our own time, and again, start speaking for ourselves again. I mean, we live in a globalized community these days, and we've got massive amounts of trade and commerce and these major international issues or things around peace and security, climate change. Climate change is a massive one. And we've got all these no man's basically an island. No, there's the idea of no man's an island, no country. Even though Australia, we are a very big island, and some we're still not an island in terms of trade, in terms of our commerce, in terms of our relationships, in terms of our future as well. So if we're the oldest diplomats in the world and we're the oldest diplomats in our region, then why can't we start again, walk back into this space and take ownership of our own affairs within this space? And the reason I guess even ATSIIEO was formed in the first place was I was very fortunate in my life and to do a lot of travel and again for work, work as a part of that travel and engage with a lot of embassies around the world. And I remember walking into having a meeting at the Australian embassy one day in China, in Beijing, and walked in and met some, lovely staff, lovely people. And but I met a lady there who was in charge of Australia's cultural engagement with China. And she said it was fantastic, to meet some Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. It was great to, be around your people and hear your stories. She said, to be honest, I don't know anything about your people, but she's in charge of, again, making sure that our image and our voices and our stories are heard throughout this country of 1.4 billion people. Well, that really didn't sit well with me at the time, because I just thought to myself, well, how can you be in charge of these things if you know absolutely nothing about our people? But this is a common story around the world. I mean, we are not the ones telling our stories internationally. I mean, we've been basically reduced to a caricature in some ways internationally, because the first thing people associate with the idea of Aboriginal people is didgeridoo, clapsticks, a boomerang, and we're standing on a hill somewhere with a spear. But the fact of the matter is, it's because we've only ever been put up in these international spaces or given attention internationally through the Australian government, through organisations like DFAT and Strait and these sort of institutions now, is if we're going over to perform a cultural performance. But ultimately, I think the fact of the matter is, when they start talking about important issues like trade, about security, when they're talking about important issues like climate change, for example, we're sent out of the room. We're not given a voice within those spaces, and I think that's a real loss to for not only for our mob, but even for these other communities who we're engaging, who our country is engaging with first and foremost as well with. Because now all of a sudden we've been caricaturized. We've been slotted into this one image of, well, you're just here for cultural engagement because that's all you can do. But where are our stories in that space? If we're going to share our culture, that's fine. I mean, that's a great thing. We're very, very proud of our culture. We're very proud of our traditions, where we come from. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Why can't we be discussing our wants, our needs, our hopes, our aspirations with these other places? Why can't those voices that exist internationally be coming from First Nations people? There's this idea, within the mental health sector of, nothing about us without us. Well, this applies in this context, in this scenario as well. Why can't it be that we're the ones out there telling our stories? Why can't it be the way, if we're going to be, if we're going to be shaking a leg with someone, if we're going to be up there and sharing a culture with these other nations around the world, it's only right that we make sure we put forward our other good qualities as well, our other aspirations, our other hopes, our other wants, and give a more of a rounded view of who we are as a people as well. And making sure that's an undiluted lens as well that's coming from First Nations people. Because again, we live in a country that's, let's face it, it's a tale of two cities. And on the one hand, they've done very well, talk about Australia internationally. And generally, it's got a very good reputation, because it's, it's seen as safe, it's sunny, it's, there's good surf, and, it's seen as a bit of a tourist sort of mecca. But at the end of the day, there's also this other side to Australia, the one that our people have experienced. We've been at the pointy end of the spear, so to speak. It's been built on our backs, but we don't get to share that story. We don't get to share these ideas with the rest of the world. And I think the fact that if we can walk into that space as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and own this space and own that idea of, well, these are our stories, this is our people, and this is what we want to see. Imagine all the good that can come from that as well. I mean, the fact of the matter is we've been, when it comes to our climate change strategies at the moment, I mean, Australia's a canary in the coal mine with this sort of stuff. I mean, we've just gone through all these flooding events, over the past year or so, and then we've got, before that, we had the bushfires, and all of a sudden these once in 100-year events are happening every 2 or 3 years now. I mean, the fact of the matter is we've lived through ice ages. We very effectively be able to sustainably live within our landscapes, within our environments, and work with our environment, to make sure and that's the whole reason we've had this longevity to begin with. But the fact of the matter is as well, like we're living in a very uncertain world at this time. It's a very it's very in some ways problematic time in history. And the fact that we're living through this now, and we've got a responsibility within this space to make sure that that our children, our children's children, children's 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 children, that they've got something to walk into tomorrow as well. I mean, also that the idea that we should be leaving this place better than how we found it. I mean, this is something we can contribute internationally as well, like our practices and our techniques and our strategies towards climate mitigation and climate action. I mean, imagine if, particularly at this time of heightened political tension between places like you've got your Australias and Chinas at the moment who've got their own political positions on each other, and that's fine. But to come into a conversation like that as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and be able to lead a discussion within that space around some sort of multilateral action on issues like climate change. I mean, it could be a really defining voice in that room, a unifying voice within that room, because again, we haven't made enemies internationally. We haven't invaded anyone. We haven't attacked anyone. We haven't done any of these sort of things to anyone else. We've got a very good reputation internationally in that regard for people who do know us. But in general as well, about us taking these steps forward as well, because again, if we're in a position where our future, our identity isn't being reflected by us, and our hopes and our wants and our aspirations as communities isn't being reflected by us, it is being reflected by the government at the end of the day. And if it is being reflected by them, well, how much do they really know about what's going on in our communities? Because I mean, the Closing the Gap report just came out, I believe it was around 2 weeks ago now or so, correct me if I'm wrong. But even after that report's come out, I mean, we're still sitting in a situation where, we're failing, I think, on 13, 14 targets and failing abysmally. I mean, we've left it in their hands for the last 250 years, since they've got here. It's been nothing but doom and gloom and depression and we seem to be going backwards. But ultimately, I think we can, if we start taking the responsibility on ourselves and we're saying, well, what we can do there, if we're going to start looking at, our own community development, because we're always talking about the symptoms, So when I say symptoms, well, we talk about the drugs, we talk about violence, we talk about alcohol, we talk about, these sort of things now. We talk about those sort of things. We're talking about the symptoms of what's happening out there. Well, very rarely does anyone ever raise the prospect of, especially it's almost unheard of within government for them to raise the prospect of, well, let's start talking about what's the root causes of those symptoms now. And again, it's because we have no political autonomy, we have no political control within our own communities. Decision making comes from Brisbane, it comes from Cairns, the money comes from these places, and hence our outcomes are tied to what bureaucrats see as particularly relevant, or bureaucrats who've never lived in these communities, never grew up in these areas, what they believe is relevant for the future and betterment of our people. And that's extremely problematic. We never have a conversation around our own economic development. The fact that some of our communities are facing 90 to 95% unemployment, some even higher. The fact that we're still living through these again, the tale of two cities. We're still living in this other city. We're still living in this other reality, while most of rest of Australia is able to enjoy the benefits and the opportunities that have come their way as a result of that. And I think if we start engaging internationally, then we can start to talk about some of these issues as well, and raise these concerns, but also talk about how we can better those situations as well for ourselves. Because again, while we place our faith in other systems, we've seen where that's gotten us. We've been going backwards on the treadmill for a long time on that. But if we can start going over and start talking about our own trade deals and our own economic development, or our own partnerships in those sort of spaces, then we can start to take some sort of a future back for ourselves. Because when we can start to create our own industries, we can start to use international capital and finance to start funding our own projects. And again, go into a situation where we've got a 50-50 arrangement, or at least, or a 51-49% arrangement. So we've got that ownership within those communities. Even better, we can I'm sure, community to community, project to project, we can, it's all on negotiable terms. So we can get better deals by working with international conglomerates or partners than what we've seen, what we're getting at the moment. I mean, mining contracts in this country are abysmal for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I mean, what are we getting? They give us Fortescue metals, for example. I mean, that's a situation where, Jesus, we've really been given the pointy end of the pineapple on that one. They give us they're going to dig up our wealth from our land, and then sell it and sell it overseas. They'll make a fortune. And what we'll get out of that is we won't even, it's not even royalties out of that, we're entitled to. They're just saying, oh, well, we'll give you a job. They'll give us a shovel to go down the mine and keep shoveling away for them. But at the end of the day, we're still left with nothing. We're left with the hole in the ground. We're left with the environmental damage. We're left with the lack of economic development, the lack of ownership, and the lack of political power within that space either. So other people are benefiting from us, but at our expense as well. But if we can go out and say, well, we've got a bigger market now to work with, and if it's just like, it's like, I guess, we're working again within a globalized community. If someone offers us a deal here and the deal's not very good, then we don't have to accept it. It's okay for us to say no to these things now. But when I understand a lot of communities' positions where there is, it is very, very hard, coming from some of these places in regional or remote areas now, because there isn't a lot of opportunity. But if we can start creating our own opportunity by, again, forging these international partnerships, ties and connections, then we can start with our own opportunities. Then we don't have to look to, other mining magnates in this country who are exploiting our people, and the country holding them up as some sort of, savior for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people within this space. Like somehow there's some white knight, in shining armor coming in to save the poor, defenseless, local, natives here. We can save ourselves, and we can do this if we start building on these international partnerships, connections. Let's build our own ties, our own trade, our own networks, and then we can start discussing not just our economic ties pathways, but ensuring our identity, our culture, our who we are as people is put out there to the rest of the world as well. I mean, again, I talked before about the idea of the caricature, and we're we're very much put on this this pedestal is, as they're happy for us to be the noble savage. But if we get beyond that, then it starts to be an issue. It's like, well, why do you want to, why do you need that cattle station? Why do you need that, why do you need the dairy farm? Why do you need the mine? Why do you need those boats? It's, for the fishing industry, why do you need all that sort of stuff? Like, we can handle that. So, well, no, this is our right as well. We can handle that. We'll handle our future from now on. If we do that, if that's, and again, we can go back to that idea of this is what self-determination can look like. We can, be talking about and looking at, facts like, our political, again, our political power within this country, our political balance of power, and in that sort of space. We can be talking about our economic development, our cultural pathways, and making sure our identities, goes around the world. So that when people look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, they're not just seeing, oh, well, that's a boomerang and that's clapsticks and that's someone holding a didge. We're putting our artists on show. We're putting our engineers on show. We're putting our doctors on show. We're putting our architects and our scientists and our all these people from across all these different industries. We're very, very good at a few things in this in this country, like things like like we're always portrayed as the great sportsman, and black fellas, mate, we're bloody great at sport. Okay, we've proven that time and time again. But where's our doctors? Where's our white collar professionals? Where's our engineers and our architects? Where's their accolades? Where's their support out there? So just making sure that, again, as well, that we as nations, we as First Nations, we put our own undiluted lens on the reality of the situation within our communities, and we put up our own people as those voices, as those representatives, to engage internationally and do it through our own systems and our own structures that we've built, rather than relying again on government agencies or services who have zero to nil understanding of who we are and our aspirations, our people and our culture. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, while we keep relying on other people to do this sort of work for us and this sort of engagement from us, they're going to be profiteering from us, but we won't be seeing any of those benefits. We need to take that future back into our own hands. And as difficult as that is, at times, like through the work of organizations like ATSIIEO now, which I'm very, very proud to be a part of, and work with a great network across the country of other, like-minded Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are, again, able to walk forward and put their own voices up internationally, organised with different embassies and different consulates across the countryside around our organising delegations over to across the South Pacific, across Southeast Asia, and into China, or into India, into the Middle East, and different parts in different other places around the world. The fact that we've got our own delegates going out now from community who can give an undiluted viewpoint on the situation on the ground in their community, but not just that situation, but highlighting this is what we've got to offer as well. This is who we are. This is what we've got to offer, right? And this is how we think we could best work together going forward into the future. All of a sudden, the power is now back in our hands, and we can start crafting our own future, our own destiny, and we can create a better world for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this world. So, again, I'll start wrapping up now anyway, because I know I've probably only got about 5 minutes left or so, but I'll just field it as well to any questions if there's any out there. But again, I'd encourage each and every one of you as well to go out again and really seize on that idea of self-determination, seize on that idea of our own political and economic autonomy within our own communities, because it's the only thing out there that's going to save us right now. So thank you very much. Dean, any questions, mate? Or
no, I think a lot of people are struggling to log into Zoom. My bad. So yeah, no questions. But yeah, appreciate it, brother. Thanks for that.
All good. Cheers, mate.